So Moon Knight is one of those rare shows that is actually pretty good, with most of those like short form 6 episode kind of Marvel shows not being that good. Now, of course, there's like WandaVision, Captain America and Falcon, or it's not called that, it's like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki, as well as WandaVision. She-Hulk hasn't been that good, but Moon Knight is actually pretty good. I know I talked about it a little bit in... Sorry about this. I know I talked about it a little bit in my Loki video, but Moon Knight is still worth talking about in its own video. So the main thing about Moon Knight is that there's kind of not like a main character. There's like two main characters. There's like this guy, I forgot his name, but he's played by the actor of Poe Dameron. I'll just call him Scott. But so Scott is this guy, and he thinks he has this problem with like walking around in his sleep, but it turns out that he has a second consciousness called Mark, who shares the same body. Actually, Mark caused or created Scott, because when he was little, he went into like a cave with his little brother, and it started raining and his little brother drowned, and then his mother like blamed him for what happened and abused him, and so then Mark ended up creating Scott somehow. It's like a second consciousness, and Scott never really knew about his mother and his brother and like about Mark, and so the start of the show is like in his perspective. In fact, most of the show is in his perspective, and he slowly figures things out and runs into this kind of creature deity named Khonshu, which is a bit confusing because it's like I'm talking about consciousness and a thing called Khonshu, which is, just keep along with me, okay? So it turns out that Khonshu is like a god, and Mark almost died, and then Khonshu saved him in return for Mark being like Khonshu's like avatar, and that he would become the Moon Knight and like do his biddings, because Khonshu is all about like bringing people to justice, which shows similar parallels to, Batman. And so, sorry if you hear like this mum just cutting wood in the background, but essentially, he's essentially like Batman, and so they have to stop this guy who's like a psychopath, because at the very beginning of the season, they show him like getting out a rag, perfectly and symmetrically sitting down a small glass of water, then praying, and then drinking that glass of water. Then he kind of like tucks the glass of water into his towel, and then he proceeds to smash the glass, and then he takes off his slipper shoes things, and he puts the glass shards in his shoes, and then proceeds to walk away in them. And even throughout later episodes, you can hear the glass crunch under his feet. And it's like, why? So essentially they're trying to stop this guy from like arising this god who, like, instead of going after people after they've already done something, she sees into the future and decides to kill them no matter what age they are, just assuming or knowing that at some point they'll do something bad. And so ends up being a point, after going on some wacky adventures, that Khonshu and this other god start fighting, and they're like super huge size. They start fighting like beside the pyramids, and then like down on the ground you got like the two main characters, or well, you got Mark and Scott, and then you got this other lady, and they're all fighting down the bottom with this evil guy. And so then it's hinted at that there's like a third consciousness, And then at the very end, after of course the heroes save the day, they kind of Mark and Scott like get freed by like the Khonshu, and then there's like a credit scene where like the evil guy is being wheeled from his psychiatric ward in like a wheelchair into a limo, and then in the limo is Khonshu sitting with him, and then at the front, because the guy that was wheeling him out had like a beret on, it turns out to be Mark's body, but a third consciousness inside of it that the other two consciousness don't know about. And so then he kills the bad guy, something that Mark and Scott explicitly told him not to do, which is why he was in the psychiatric ward, because like the god went inside of him, or like became part of him. So yeah. So the show overall is pretty good. It was like the first one of those big TV screen like live action shows that keep me invested, because usually they just feel like long drawn out movies that have no right being that long. Meanwhile, like, sorry about my voice, but meanwhile, like the 20 episode kid shows, they have like, each episode has meaning to it, even if some are like just like filler, but they all link into one another and keep you watching. This one but most of them kind of just feel like long drawn out movies for the live action, like big blockbuster shows. But this one was the first one that convinced me otherwise. And then I watched Loki, so yeah. Anyway, it's pretty good. I like the whole Egyptian aesthetic. It's actually taught me a lot about Egyptian gods and all that, so it's actually pretty educational. It is actually the darkest Marvel property yet. Like, there's a lot more blood, there's a lot more dark moments. So yeah, it's kind of hinting towards a Marvel movie that's more mature, like in the future. MatPat did a video on that, but anyway. So I'll give it like my standard 8.5 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 or whatever. But you know the drill. Anyway, I'm gonna see you later. Bye.